Hello, hello. Welcome back. It's another episode of Leading Women in Tech. I'm your host, Toni Collis, and today I'm talking with Ushi Patel about how you can be more yourself, more authentic, build your brand because you're authentic as a leader, and what that actually means. And this isn't your typical personal brand conversation. Ushi and I had a conversation that ranged from how we diminish ourselves. I talked about a story I have from my childhood and how that means for such a long time as an executive, I shrank. And how there's a correlation between what we do and how we can get what we want as women and what we need to be doing differently to get what we want. Ushi's story is fascinating. She wanted to be an engineer, or at least thought she did, but she wasn't happy and moved to arts with business. But what that meant is that she's now working in the tech sector and other sectors, supporting people in understanding how they're perceived because she's got that creative insight, how to build our confident self without burnout, how to build being powerful and be our own change agents without being told we're too loud or audacious. What we do with the bias that's there in industry, why we aren't looked in the eye. We talk about asking someone to look you in the eye and going for gold. This one really stuck with me. Today's conversation should open your eyes to how maybe you are holding yourself up unconsciously without even knowing it, and how you need to surround yourself with the right evidence to step into your greatness. How we can build the right habits and let go of the unhealthy habits. If someone's not looking you in the eye and it's getting under your skin, today's episode is the episode you need to listen to. So without further ado, let's get Ushi onto the show. Welcome to the show, Ushi. It's so good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited.
I am seriously excited. I feel like we should be recording our previous conversations. So let's get going straight away with share with, like we've already just had a great conversation and the world just missed out. So we're going to try and recreate that. But share with the audience today your career so far, the highlights, those lowlights, and why today you're so passionate about supporting women in tech in their leadership journey.
Oh, yeah. First of all, I love that question. My 3-year-old always asks me every day, what was your highlight, mommy? What was your low light?
Oh, I love that.
And it's like a really great way to connect as a family over dinner and be very aware. I mean, look, we're talking to us here, women in tech, and I'll get into what you asked me in just one second, but it's so easy to lose sight of your daily highlights because you're so focused on the climb,
Mm-hmm.
And was my 3-year-old and his friend, who's also a 3-year-old, that brought me back to like, hey, hello, your life was great today. And I like talking about lowlights because lowlights in art are really important to the masterpiece of it all. So instead of talking about it as like a downer or a challenge, it was just something that added a little shadow to the painting. So anyways, I love that question. Well, I came to my career not knowing I wanted to be in my career. I think we grow up told that you should be a certain thing, or maybe you even have like a passion or something that you're inspired by, so you pursue it. But I thought I should be an engineer, and I thought, which is remarkable because many of your listeners might be engineers, but I thought I should be a doctor, and then that would equate to a very happy life. But I was an artist. And when I was 10 days into engineering school, my dad looked at me and he's like, stay. And I was like, I'm not staying, Daddy. And I got into an art school, and he made a deal with me that I could continue with art school if I had a business degree. And that put me at the time at this intersection of a conversation, at least in the US, about great business requires creative thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
And also at a time when Steve Jobs was talking a lot about the importance of brand. And so early on, I worked in enterprise branding. And after, having an amazing trajectory and an outside life that looked like enviable, I, people might say burnt out, but what I felt like it was like a shell of who I was. Everything looked great on the outside, but I wasn't very connected to who I thought I wanted to be on the inside. And so I took a year off. I always say it was very privileged because I didn't have a mortgage or kids at the time. So I could take a year off, but I took a year sabbatical, and I realized that I had left myself out along the way. And so with, that method and that way of coming back into myself, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, the gist is that I started applying those same enterprise branding tactics with this like newfound knowledge of how to relate to myself to help women in tech and really anybody at the executive level build their personal brand and understand why that's important. And I'm thousands of sessions in. I love my work. I love my job. I don't love all aspects of my job. Let's be real. I'm like, no one, I mean, some people like admin, but the thing I love the most is that I'm able to see a direct correlation by what we do and how women can have what they want and how a lot of times we're convinced out of it, but we don't need to be. So that's what I do. Now, the hard skill set is, personal brand coaching and messaging, finding your unique identity and, designing your personal presence. That's what people come to me for. But what I believe that they leave with and what I know from the sessions is that they have a greater sense of confidence and self and understanding of their unique values. So that's a long way of sharing where I've been. I think some people might say unconventional. I know my entire tech family thinks like, we don't know what she does. Like, I don't know what she does, but that's how I find myself here. And I just have a soft spot for women in tech. I work with a lot of women in tech. And it just seems to be this industry of very powerful, brilliant women change agents, which is also why I just love talking to you. I joked that I want to fly into the UK and have a drink with you right now.
I know. I feel like we need to get ourselves on the sofa with some champagne and just have a good.
Yes.
Okay, I'm totally coffee and champagne. I'm like, not bothered which one. And I think one thing that really resonated with me, which you've just highlighted there, but also when we were chatting before, was your passion for these powerful, brilliant women, these change agents. And I know when we were talking before, part of why you do what you do is because so many of us shrink. And we had this conversation about how I was told by my photographer, like the first time I ever had a professional branding shoot, which was terrifying for me anyway. And my photographer pointed out to me that I would hold myself small. I try and minimize how much space I was taking up. And, this was as a coach, coaching myself and thinking, oh yeah, that's what I do. I don't take up much space. I shrink. I don't want to be a problem in the room. And I think, when we talked about this, you were saying like, this is what we do. So many of these brilliant women you work with, we shrink. We don't take up space. So let's start there. Why do we do this? What's the problem with it as well?
I mean, that's what we joked about. You shared it as an anecdote and I was like, no, let's talk about that. Why did you shrink, Toni? An otherwise well-educated, brilliant woman on a mission felt that she couldn't take up space. And, the short of it is we all have a reason, usually stemming from something along the way in our childhood where somebody told us we were something too audacious, too loud, too cute, too this, too that. And so we take those twos and it's like very subtly, it erodes our decision about ourselves, right? So something was operating in your head at that moment that if I stand tall in this photo shoot, then this. And it was a judgment. Are you aware of what it was in that moment, by the way?
I think there was a lot of things when I was younger when it's where I trace my imposter syndrome back to as well, which I think is very fascinating. I remember I heard from somebody else, a teacher who I really admired, saying, Toni is not as clever as she thinks she is. And this was at a point in my life where I didn't think I was clever at all. So to hear a teacher saying this to somebody, it was like, Toni needs to shut up and give space to somebody else. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm really bad. And I can trace all my imposter syndrome and self-doubt back to that era. I think that's the comment that's stuck in my head, but I'm sure there are lots of other tiny things that added up to that one being so terrifying. I've had so many conversations over the years with other women that we've all got a story like that. That's just my story.
Yeah. And the story builds on itself. So in that context of, let's say personal brand, you're in a photo shoot. And I actually love creative process like that to bring out these insecurities. Like the second you tell somebody like me, you have to go on video. I used to find myself like, oh, terrified. I don't want to be on video, especially like this is okay because I'm with you. But if I was like me in a camera, I just find it the hardest thing. And it was so important to building my visibility. So I had to overcome that. And then yes, it's a really important, provoker of you knowing the place where you decided that you should shrink. And I think it's incredible self-awareness on your part. And it's actually that liberation that, that we seek, where it's like, you might be doing that in a meeting and not knowing it. You might be doing it on a Zoom call. You probably are, you know, by some perception in you that that person across from you is better than, more than. And then you were talking about that phrase of yours, comparisonitis.
Comparisonitis, yeah, favorite phrase of mine.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I don't love the act of it, but I love the way you've named it. Because that's the thing, is that story built on another story. And all of a sudden, what's being affirmed in your external world is this story that's in your head. And so that's when people are like, oh, cool, I'm going to work with you on personal brand. And we're going to go into like what my heels look like, or how I'm showing up in the media, or how you're going to get me on podcasts. Yeah, all of that can happen. And all of that has a certain value to a certain person, depending on your goal. I'll never say that that's what you need to do for personal brand. I think it starts with that, like knowing the stories that are causing you to diminish and not show up as your full, vibrant, authentic self. And let me tell you, like the women in tech, I come from a tech family. I don't necessarily describe myself as a woman in tech. In fact, maybe I ran from it a lot. But I do see that tech is a notoriously hard industry to not shrink against.
Yeah.
There's a lot of narrative and influence around not enough and do better so that you can be seen, or so that you can have the job or juicy project or influence that you want to have.
But that's really interesting, because you just said it's notoriously hard for us not to shrink against. But then you're talking about, you know, we want to have that juicy project, we want to have all that stuff. And surely that would encourage us to speak out, put our voices up and say, hey, I want that. But we don't. I thought it was really interesting the way you said there, like, if I'm doing that in a photo shoot, I'm doing it elsewhere. And I remember being called out when the first advisory board I was on, I was called out by another female leader on that board who just took me under her wing, which was amazing for me. She said, Toni, every time you speak up, you say, can I just, or I'm sorry, this might be a stupid idea. Every time.
Totally. Yeah.
And that was a form of shrinking, you know? And I think this is the thing. Like, I knew that being on that board was an amazing opportunity for my career. It was extraordinary. It opened the door to the C-suite. It was so good for me. And yet my instinct even there was to shrink. So how do we, why is it why is it so hard for us to not shrink? Like, what is going on? And I know one of the things I want to touch on here is men. Both in terms of, are they part of the problem? But also, we had a chat yesterday when we first were speaking about this and what we were going to talk about today, in terms of men appreciating the change that we bring as well. So why is it, despite all this clamor for show and ask and do the things, because that's how you make a difference, why do we still shrink in that situation?
Well, we bought into something on a very deep level. You know, I will never say there isn't bias. You had asked me about that as well. Like, are you saying that there is no bias? And there's absolutely bias. Mm-hmm. There are absolutely multiple women who have told me how they will be in a meeting, and despite their qualifications, the person that they are, presenting to isn't looking them in the eye. And sometimes it's women, by the way, but a lot of times it's a male counterpart, or to use corporate language, superior, which again, see all of this like subtle language to maybe affirm that you're lesser than. So there's some place that we believe we don't deserve or are not enough in relation to that board position or that VP position. And it is really tricky because you probably, like I say this all the time, like, no, I want it. I want it. It's not a matter of do I want it or not. It's a matter of the story I'm telling myself and the identity that I'm becoming. I always say this about vision boards. I love a great vision board, but putting a bunch of pictures to see is not the only part of that formula. You have to become who you are needing to be to have those things. So a person who shrinks cannot have that board position. And so you start to train yourself is that person in that board position is standing tall. Now, if you happen to get that board position while you're shrinking, let me tell you, that board position is going to be miserable for you because now already you've set the tone for you not being wholly who you are, seen, valued, and respected in relation to that position. And that happens all the time. You often get it. And then you're like, oh crap, the same dang story just followed me to the new position. Right. And so that's why these otherwise other women, it's us that we get burnt out or we start over complicating or over performing or over functioning or not speaking up because we're still operating on that story. So that's the why. And I know, I like to connect with my neuroscience friends and colleagues. And there is a reason we've trained our brain and there's a place in our brain that's trying to keep us safe. So just to simply tell you to drop your story won't work. It has to be a habitual decision to be different in relation to. And so part of what we do is like, okay, cool. Thank you. You're here to keep me safe. I have this instinct to shrink, but I'm going to choose something different. I know why you were here. I know what you're saving me from. It's something that we decided a long time ago, but in this moment, I'm going to decide to stand tall. So that's one thing. But the other thing is the humans like evidence, I like external validation. So we talked about like this book of me that we build, and you have to constantly surround yourself with evidence of your greatness. You have to collect it, acknowledge it. And it's not an act of ego to understand. And it's not just your resume, right? It's like, I went from this to this, from this to this, from this to this. So I actually should stand tall here because of my value. I stand tall here. And it becomes over time a habit of standing tall versus this one moment where you switch. You do make the switch in your head, but over time you start to set the tone for how people should treat you by how you treat yourself.
Yeah. I think you just hit something really important there. You talked about habit. And I think a lot of the conversations we're having in society at the moment about women in leadership roles, not just in tech, but across the world, are conversations around how it's, double standards. We're told to be more assertive. We get more assertive. We're told we're aggressive. And it's all the fault of
the twos.
Yeah, right. And it's all the fault. There is a narrative in the world of the fault is all on the others, not on us. And here's my discomfort with that. Part of what we've just discussed here is a habit that we've built. And in my experience, my own personal experience, it was self-protectionism. That comment from that teacher that got under my skin and all the other micro events that happened that meant I shrank. I have a habit of shrinking. Clearly, I didn't have that habit as a tiny little girl. The stories from my mom about me as a little girl, I was audacious. I was vibrant. I was everybody's faces. I was that little girl that was a bit of a terror, but also excited. And I liked everybody and everything. And that got taken away from me. And the habit I then had as an adult was to be, I'm still loud. Like I am a loud person. And I'm an opinionated person. That's my biggest problem. I have opinions and so I will say things, but then I shrink. And my shrinking is a habit. My inability, and I see this in clients of mine, my ability to navigate what it means to be assertive in a healthy way is a habit. And I think, and this is where I have to be very, very careful that this is not taken out of context because I'm not victim blaming here, not even close. What I am saying is we have some level of control to change those habits so we can step into our greatness. That evidence in the book of me that says you're great. What if we could just redo this conditioning to step into your greatness and thrive despite the bias against us? And I just think we need to have that conversation a bit more.
Yeah. And well, see, the thing is for you, even the habit isn't shrinking. The habit is what's causing you to shrink.
Yes, I like that. That is a really good subtle point.
Yeah. Because again, then we're continuing to wrong women, right? Oh, well, now you're shrinking. That's why you don't have what you have. Or now you're shrinking and that's why you have a weak personal brand. And that's where I agree with you. I would, the victim shaming and no, women, especially women in tech, it's tough.
It's really
I
tough.
said that to you, that there's this really interesting war torn on the positive side grit about the women in tech that I work with.
Yeah.
But there's also pain,
There's real pain,
and
real pain.
There's real pain. And to say that pain is you, that's not it. But the pain perpetuates and the scenario perpetuates because of us. And this happened. I shared this with you too. I was surprised, like the number of times a woman tells me that a man doesn't look at her in the eye when she is actually presenting data that's going to help him and the team succeed.
Yeah.
Or talking over them or discounting the thing. Now, you're not going to change that guy. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is we're setting the tone and what you're willing to tolerate in your world. And what starts to happen is the less you tolerate that, the less of those come around. And let me tell you, this is where it's hard. If your livelihood's at stake, what are most people choosing? Of course, their livelihood, right? But the truth is that look at the cost of that livelihood and staying in that scenario. So it's self-advocacy that I'm talking about. And the way to shift the habit is to shift the thinking. But sometimes I also feel like, okay, that's super lofty, but you can look at it in that moment and say, excuse me, could you look me in the eye?
I love that. You said this to me before we hit record. You're like, you can say, look me in the eye. And my immediate response is, oh, no, I couldn't do that. And that's my like little inner critic going, no, that's too vulnerable making. So I love this. Like, this is the bit I really want to dive into. Like, how do we go about that and feel safe going about that?
Yeah, it's not safe. That's the thing.
Okay.
I don't know. I cannot control what that man might do. He could easily gaslight you. He could easily tell his colleagues that, oh, she's so, I don't know, high maintenance. These are all the things that we fear, right? Mm-hmm. You have your own list of what that outcome is, and I have my own list of what that outcome is. And we can't control what they do. They very well might do it. But the decision is that I'm going to say it anyway because I'm training you how to treat me. What I will say is I've observed over time. Of course, also, by the way, you don't get to that moment. Like some people get mad and that moment just happens just out of the blue because they're so resentful and frustrated. I don't recommend that. I think it could actually kill your career. But I think that over time you start to say, hey, could you look me in the eye? Hey, I think that what I'm saying is going to be really instrumental to your vision. Can you look me in the eye? It's going to create discomfort, but this fear of this discomfort is what allows us to bear the burden of the fact that that's actually not great behavior, dude. That's actually not respectful. It's also not professional. And whatever keeps it living in your world cool, it's not about me. It's not personal. And in this moment, I think you need to look me in the eye, right? Mm-hmm. And we also, I think what I see is women who are very committed to goals, and we make this assumption that that's going to stop the work somehow, or it's going to be inconvenient, or most people, there are definitely, there's this world of the narcissist and all that. But generally speaking, a person might not even know they're not looking you in the eye. And also it stems from their discomfort with who they are, Mm-hmm. So if you can take the personal out of it and without charge, say, hey, look me in the eye, and forget all the reasons in your head you think that they're not looking in the eye. That's how over time you set the tone. And that first time you do it, you're going to feel like you're going to puke in your mouth because it's like, are you kidding me, Ushi? And listen, even with all my tools and the way that I'm speaking now, there are times where I have this sense of intimidation, like, I can't tell this person that. But I do, despite the like knot in my tummy, because I have to, right? Like I have to, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be a woman in my own integrity that says I'm valuable, if I don't do it, then I'm not upholding my value. So I'm not perfect at all, but that's why I go back to my evidence, and I actually am pretty hard on myself after a meeting if I don't do it. So
Oh,
that's why I say it's a habit. It's not an overnight thing that all of a sudden you're speaking up on your behalf or you're this advocate for yourself. Uh, but why? Yeah. Ask yourself, why are you letting people treat you like that?
I love that, because I think one of the things I've worked on so much on myself and with clients is not being walked over. And so we do a lot of work on, like, if somebody interrupts you, how to deal with that. And understanding the different kinds of interruption. I'm a bit of an interrupter because I'm excited and passionate, but then there are the interrupters who are toxic, right? And knowing the difference and knowing not to take one in the wrong context, in the wrong way. And there are just those of us who are just excited, and we need to be controlled. But at the
Yeah.
same time, like, you don't need to feel as negative towards it. But I've never challenged somebody to look me in the eye, ever. Obviously, in the work I now do today, I mean, people pay me a lot of money to get on a call with me. So looking me in the eye is kind of the job description. But interestingly, I shrink away from it in our personal lives. It's just this last week, we needed to go and speak to somebody. And I was like, to my husband, this person has no respect for me. I'm a woman. They don't understand that women are powerful. They have no respect. Can you go do it? And he was like, all right. And there was part of me that
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, I'm so ashamed. But after a day's work, the last thing I want to do is then go and use that muscle, that assertiveness muscle that is hard work because it's so indoctrinated to not be like that. I don't want to use that in my personal life. Is that a good or a bad thing?
I think that's what I mean by the grit. Like, yet another thing a woman has to do in order to succeed in her life. Like, my husband's not over there trying to figure out how to have people look him in the eye. Trust me, he's not doing any personal development work on that one. He just sort of naturally comes in and is like, if you're not looking me in the eye, it's your problem. And he came like that. He didn't come like that. He was raised like that. Right. But I watch him. I watched the same scenario. And by the way, I totally send him into the electric bill when it's double the price it should be. The second he gets on, the thing gets solved. It's
Yes,
like, that's
right?
why so what I want to say is that's why I call it a skill set and a habit, and it's something to be proficient in. But you have a lot on your plate to be proficient in something. So if we can reframe it as proficiency versus something else that you have to do as a woman, it starts to, again, give you that powerful stance, that confident stance that I'm exercising it in this moment because of this. So for example, in that same meeting, many of these women are like, what's most surprising to them is that it is for a bottom line that actually benefits the entire room, even more so that not looking them in the eye, even more so the company. And so that's the reason that you are choosing that skill set in that moment, because you're actually doing it to get what you want, right? Versus I'm doing it because this guy is doing it to me, or I'm doing it because I have to be a strong woman. No, you're doing it like anyone, like a gymnast would hone her skill of, I don't know, I'm not a gymnast, whatever skill they hone, balance. I was watching Simone Biles last night, you can tell. And she's just, yeah, she's so incredible. But like, look at her. She's not going to do it just to exert her power. She's doing it because she's like, I want gold, right? So,
Yeah.
so that's what I can say. And I do think you know, like, oh wow, I have to have this like incredible resume, and I have to have all these incredible results, and I'm driving myself and working myself into the bone because I don't feel like I can make an error as a woman in tech because I'm already being misjudged, or I'm already operating within this bias. It's true. No one's saying that that's not true, but can't you make it a bit easier on yourself by being your own advocate and being your own really best friend, right?
I love actually the fact you just brought up Simone Biles. I mean, that woman is extraordinary, and I don't think anybody on the planet would disagree with that, even if you, for whatever crazy reason, you didn't like her. She is extraordinary. But you mentioned there, she's not doing it. She's doing it because she wants gold. And one of the tactics I've used over the years, with myself and with clients, and I feel like I live my clients' journey, I'm just several years ahead of them, is leaning into why I'm doing something. So rather than being frustrated on the sidelines, and I get so many women coming to me who are simultaneously holding themselves back, shrinking, and frustrated, I lean into what is it I'm trying to achieve? Going for gold. So I'm going for gold. That's why I'm going to go stand up and be tall. And that's actually another tactic I'd like to talk about instead of looking in the eye. So I've never called somebody out for not looking me in the eye, but what I do is excuse my language, but I don't take any shit. That's what I've learned to do. Like, I don't take any shit, and I will just keep asserting myself. I will stand taller if I'm actually in the room with somebody. Yes. And it's very hard when I get into that mindset, and it's the going for gold mindset. It's not about me. It's about what I need to do with this conversation, what I'm trying to achieve, the outcome that the entire organization needs me to make. As soon as I make it about something external, it's so much easier. When I'm going for gold, I can stand taller and hold myself.
But you know what's so interesting is now that I know that about you and you can know that about me, we never have to worry that it's ever an interrupting because I don't respect your thoughts. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about in terms of cultivating these moments where you're actually seen and lifted. But yes, I also think the going for gold is different for Simone Biles than it is for Suni Lee. Ooh, they both were going for gold, right? And gold stands for something to everybody. It stands for something different. A lot of people have been talking about Simone Biles' redemption tour, right? And I was like, what the heck is she redeeming? This woman's amazing. Like, I don't understand what everyone thinks she's redeeming. She doesn't need redemption. And so look at the perception, right? So when you're thinking about what your goal is and what your why is, and you know, you're very clear. I've actually not met many people who are as clearly articulate as you around, look, Ushi, this company exists to help women in tech and elevate their leadership. Like, it was so clear. And maybe I missed the language, but the energy of what you said has stayed with me, right? It's that, right? So if you start to hold that gold, not just as a set of desires or a want, but as your becoming and the thing that you came here to do. I think some people call it purpose, but I feel like you get caught up in purpose of like, is my purpose good enough? Is it amazing enough? Is it impactful enough? But the gold is really, I'm on this journey, and this journey is hard. There is no question about Simone Biles' journey being so challenging. And I know I need to be on this journey, right?
Yeah.
That's the gold. Because then when it gets hard, you're like, great, more reps. Great, get back up. Great, have a moment, cry, scream, and a pillow. This is our current new thing to do in the household to quell the toddler's craziness. Go scream in a pillow. Whatever that thing is for you, release. Look, you know, there's this other weird storyline in tech. I mean, it's probably in finance. It's probably in any sort of typically male-dominated industry, which, by the way, they all are, because for so long, everyone told us we should be in a kitchen and a house. I mean, like, of course, right? Like, most industries will be male-dominated because of the, you know, the topography of it. But yeah, like, have your emotion. No one's saying no to that. And there's so much suppression of that emotion. It's freaking wrong. You're allowed to say that. Now, where you say that and how you say that's a different story. But what we do is, that's not working for me, I'm going to diminish.
Yeah, we internalize it. We make it all about us. It's the, and this is what I'm getting at in we have more control than we think we do in these situations because of how much we internalize. And we've been told to internalize. It's the people pleasing. We're told keep everybody else happy. That's how we're indoctrinated as girls. And therefore we internalize and we say diminish because that'll make everybody else more comfortable around us.
Yeah. Yeah. This is like your comparison thing.
Yeah. It's a comparison. It's, I think this is one of the most damaging things we've done. Okay, I want to move this on because I've got a really important question to ask you about asking for help. One of the conversations we had yesterday, and I kind of wish we'd recorded all of our conversations so far. Yeah. But one thing you and I both agreed on was how hard it is for so many of the women we work with to ask for help, whether that's coming to us as coaches or even just asking a friend or a colleague or anybody to ask for help. We sit in this mindset of, I'm successful, I should just be grateful for where I am. I don't need to ask for support. Why does that come about, and what should we be doing about it?
Well, I think it's what you said. I loved what you said, which is it's like this weird guilt that, and I really mean weird, because oftentimes you're faced with that. Like, okay, I need help. Like, it is the silliest thing to think another mother doesn't understand how stressed out you are and wouldn't come over and help you. But where I go with that is, oh, she's busy too.
Yes, right. We do that so much.
Yeah. Or I have plenty. Why don't I just call a babysitter or nanny, whatever, So I think it's like that over mitigating of how others are feeling, which is why it was such a natural progression to when you were saying people pleasing. It's like, sometimes there can be a black and white to it. I need help, period. Right? Okay. There doesn't have to be a reason why I need the help. It's not a sign of weakness. We don't need to overanalyze why she needs help right now. Yeah, maybe you could have been more efficient, or maybe you shouldn't have, I don't know, binge watched something on Netflix. But like, you need help, period. It's so uncomfortable. Even right now, I'm like, can I say that? Sometimes.
And I actually think you bringing up motherhood there is a really fascinating example. Because I was reading something not that long ago about how 100 years ago, it was very normal for women to breastfeed each other's children. Very, very normal, very common. So not only did we ask for help, we actually gave something as simple as, but as extraordinary as breastfeeding. There's a whole conversation in society about how you're somehow less if you don't breastfeed, right? And there's so much guilt. But then you're in complete isolation around it. You're lucky if you get access to somebody like a lactation consultant. But why are we not reaching out to each other? It's taboo to be reaching out to each other. And I feel like we've gone backwards. It's almost like, because we've now made it, and I put that in air quotes because I think there's a lot to be said there, but we've made it in the professional world. We can't ask for help at all because society has pushed us down the entire way of making it professionally. It's like, oh, I can't be seen to be asking for help. And men get help all the time and ask for help all the time. Like, would you agree with like what I'm asserting there, that we've actually lost the ability to ask help over the last 100 years?
Well, I like that you're saying ability, right? This like natural feeling, like in order to do this, like, look, if you were a woman in tech and you're a leader, the first thing, if I said to you, here's the thing that we need to do, you would resource your team.
Exactly. Right.
Very matter of fact, right? It's like, this is the next step. I need to resource the project and the team. And I think that that's the thing, is we don't think of ourselves as the project or the team. And if we could reframe it, like, this is the thing that makes this thing run. And so she deserves, it's not even deserve, because deservability can get a little like a sense of entitlement, but it's like, in order to make this thing go in the way we want it to go, it needs to be resourced. And I think the word help, unfortunately, sometimes implies, again, lesser. Somebody is like, it's not reciprocal. And that's a very uncomfortable place to be. Like, I find that in my own self and the people and the women that I work with, is that if they don't perceive they have the time or bandwidth to reciprocate, they don't ask. Because it's like, how dare I ask from this busy woman and not be able to immediately give it back, versus like, hey, heck yeah, I'm going to help this girl. I believe in what she's doing. I mean, it brings me joy to help other women. And so that's number one. Number two, why do we isolate around it? This is, I think, very common, is because we think we're the only ones going through it. Yeah. Because isolation perpetuates itself. Like, I'm the only one who feels this wobble. Which is why people like this podcast and your platform is so important, so that other women can go, oh crap, that guy not looking me in the eye. I'm not the only one. There are literally women all over the world who are powerful and smart and certified who this is happening to. Right. Yeah. And that again, it's like that mistake. It's not a mistake. It's like the I'm the only one. I'm the only one who doesn't have it together and didn't put the goldfish in the lunch the right way. Of course, I'm the only one. I'm the only one who got frustrated in a meeting. No way. We all are. And there's something weird about culture, like corporate culture, that I don't want you to cry in the boardroom, but man, you're allowed to have a bad day. You're allowed to say like, it's not going my way today and you're really good at this. Could you step in? That's actually smart leadership. That's not a weakness, right?
It's 100% smart leadership. And I think that vulnerability of being able to say, I love that, because I think people struggle with what vulnerable and authenticity is. It's exactly what you said. It's not crying in the boardroom, but it's saying, hey, I'm not doing great today. Can you step in? That is showing your vulnerability, but with leadership presence. And I love that. I have one final question I have to get to before we move to the quickfire round, which is, you've obviously got so much experience in supporting women, helping them thrive, helping them excel. So what would you tell your younger self about the road ahead? If you could go back 20 years and say, this is what you need to know, you're going to be all right, what would you say to her?
That you're going to be all right. Stop worrying. And I'd also say, like, I love you. You know, I really love you. You might not have it in your perception altogether all the time, or wish that, you know, well, I don't know if all women wish this, but like, I know for me, I struggled a lot. Like, I can only have it when I'm the perfect weight, or when I have the perfect articulation, or silly little things like when I don't have bags under my eyes. I don't know, like this weird thing I used to do to myself where I would like nitpick all the reasons why you aren't completely equipped for the vision that you have in your life. And I want to tell her to stop nitpicking. You know, there's so much beauty to you. There's so much. And actually it is the cornerstone of what I help women with, you know, is come back to, like, I look at other 20-year-old women and I'm like, that girl is badass, you know, and it's so joyful to watch other people succeed. Again, with the Olympics, like, it doesn't matter if they're from the US. If I see a woman athlete doing her thing, it's like, it still gives me chills, right? So why can't I have that for myself? So 20-year-old girl, like, I'm cheering you on. Like, I'm not resisting you. I want you to succeed. I want you to have the things that you want. You're okay to have the things you want, like that. Start talking to her like that. By the way, you talk to her like that, you start to see you're talking to yourself like that still. Like like that nitpicking was still present in my 40s. And that's what woke me up to it. This question is so beautiful. And in fact, I always think that that's what a woman should do, is write her book, A Letter to Herself, in her 20s, and also older. The one that's older is more aspirational, but the one in your 20s is really great for gathering your lived experience and how far you've come in your confidence, the way you see yourself. And that's the thing, is what the way you see yourself is going to influence how you show up. And then how you show up gets you the more yeses and the validations and the successes that then influence how you see yourself, which how you show. So you got to get yourself into that cycle. And I think that's the thing, is we all focus on, oh, I have to show up differently, so let me go to the tactics that get me the more yeses, versus starting with this question of yours, like, how do you see yourself? And let that inform whether this is the moment to tell the person to look you in the eye or not, versus I have to do it because I heard Ushi say it, you know, which is so easy to do, you know.
I love that. I feel like the mantra from Jay is, look me in the eye and it's time to stand tall. It's such a powerful one. Just a little one there. You talk about writing letters to yourself, like, you know, in the past and the future. One thing I do is, like, it's kind of related, but not hugely, but is every 6 months or so, I will write myself a letter for myself 6 months in the future. I actually put it in my calendar because I'm terrible at paper.
So good idea.
I write myself a note in a calendar entry for myself, and I put it in the calendar in 6 months' time. And I'm so gracious to myself when I do that. I'm so gracious. And I read those to myself and I'm like, oh, I'm okay. I'm doing fine. Like, this is hard. Today is hard. Or, you know, things aren't going great, or things are going well, and I'm actually further ahead than I thought I would be. Like, whatever it is that I wrote to myself, it gives me a sense of perspective. I think that's a beautiful, like, little tactic that I think any of us can do that will just give you little pick-me-ups. I love it.
I love it. And what it reminds me of is like this idea that we're finite and we're not
Hmm.
iterative.
Yeah.
Humans by nature are iterative, and a creative process, you will change, you will evolve. So it's not about a finite point. And when people used to tell me like, love the journey, I was like, shut up. Like, I'm not loving this journey right now. And I want a destination. And we talked about gold, but for me, what that means is that you're constantly evolving to like your best self, your most, your greatest potential.
Hmm.
It's a much gentler way to hold yourself than to drive yourself to the bone to get somewhere. And again, every one of us does that, and you're not the only one if that's what you're feeling like, you might be doing. And these letters and scheduling it. I love the schedule because that's the habitual part of things, is that that's like kind of the retraining, is like the second you get in your calendar, it's like everything follows, right?
Yeah.
So
If it's not in my calendar, it doesn't happen.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the quickfire round. Otherwise, we will be here all day, which is kind of fun. And maybe we need to do a follow-up or a series or something. But let's get on to the quickfire round. What is the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oh my God, I've been given so much bad advice. Well, you know what? No advice is bad. It's supposed to be quick round. You're going to be like, shut up, Ushi. No advice is ever bad. But the thing that I always hear is about like, in order to be successful or have a strong personal brand, you need to have a following or post in social media all day.
Mm-mm.
And I think that it's just terrible, because then you start tangling yourself up in knots. And really, like, my business is entirely driven by referrals. I will show up in social media and things like this because I know it furthers my mission and the conversation. But it was really great to know that that's a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a leader listening to this, I'm talking about personal brand with leaders, and I know that's what you do. And you don't need to be on social media. You need to have demonstrated your credibility in your industry, but there are so many different ways of doing that, and you've got to find your way of doing it. I love that piece of advice. Interestingly, you just did what we're kind of talking about there in terms of diminishing yourself, and that you said,
Yeah.
this is not quick, and you're going to say, shut up, Ushi.
There.
You
Yes.
said that right there. This is that diminishing. And I only noticed it because we've just had this conversation, but we do it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Explaining ourselves away. Totally.
I know,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, listening to this, ladies, if you're listening to this, like, notice that we're doing it too. It doesn't make it right. It just means that we're also a work in progress, but there's so much we can do. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Don't take advice from unhappy people. I'm not going to explain it away. Yeah. Don't take advice from unhappy people.
I love that. I love that piece of advice. Such a great one. Okay. What is the last book you read, and would you recommend it?
Dragons love tacos. And if you have a kid, it's great. I have to say that the reason that I love it is that this author, and it's escaping me the name, but he's so freaking himself that like it's impossible not to love. And so I think it's really relevant. But the boys and I have been reading it and acting it out, and there's a pleasure to that. So whatever self-development book that I probably should be reading is on my side table.
I love it when people I get so many great recommendations for books, and most of the ones I really follow through on are the novels. So never apologize for not bringing the self-help book with you. I think I don't have kids, but I do have a niece and nephew, so maybe Dragons with Tacos is coming in for that. But next, meet up with a niece and nephew.
Definitely.
Yeah. Mindset. At the end of every episode, I love to share a mindset tip. So what is your favorite mindset tip for this audience, our women in tech leaders who need to maybe stand tall and ask men to look them in the eye?
Yeah, I think it's that one that we mentioned previously that's so helpful, which is this inner critic, this imposter, this mean girl that's showing up in your head was put there for a reason. It was helping you to be safe. And so it's really great to thank her instead of try to judge her or say like, oh my gosh, why is she here? Nobody else has her. She's there. Like, she's probably right here for me, right? Like, you feel her. She comes in right here. And when you feel her, it's like, you know what? Thank you so much, because you did keep me safe, right? And now we're in a different situation. So it's that decision. It's the mindset is she's all right. There's nothing here to fix. She's not wrong. And yet I'm going to make a different choice in this moment. That's what I think is important. Say thank you. This stuff isn't coming up because you're bad or wrong or, inept in some way. It's coming up so that you have this platform and opportunity to get what you want and to be more of who you are. So welcome it. We suppress and we resist. And that's part of what the discomfort and the war-torn feeling is.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. This has been an amazing conversation. As I said, like you and I, we just need to get on a sofa together with some good drinks and have a good chat.
Yes.
And maybe record it for the entire human race. But in the meantime, how can people connect with you and find out more about what you do?
Yeah. So you can do that at ushi-inc.com. And definitely I'd love for you to stay connected with me on LinkedIn, /Ushi Patel. And it's Ushi like sushi without the S, Ushi Patel. Of course, I know you'll drop it, but I really like to connect. I mean, again, like I said, most of my world is connecting with you one-on-one. And I would love for us to do that. If you find that you want to tame the inner critic or build your personal brand.
Yes, 100%. Well, on that note, what is the final thought you want to leave our audience with today?
I'm going to say the one that I wasn't going to say, and that is that you are valuable. You are beautiful, you are valuable, and it doesn't, your work identity has nothing to do with who you are as a whole person, and let those parts of yourself come to the table and watch the magic, really.
Watch the magic. I love that so much.
And I want to say this last piece for you to close out on is the reason I was going to lead with a tactic, and I went with my feeling, and that's what I want most for all women everywhere, is that there is a sense of self-trust that they can go with, and that's where the magic is, not necessarily the tactics. Those are good, but you and you.
Trusting ourselves. That is such a beautiful note to finish on, because I always talk about being unique at the end of every episode. And I think when we trust ourselves, our uniqueness that really comes out. So as always, I say to you every time, listeners, remember, stay in your tech leadership game and follow your dreams, because the world really needs that uniqueness that you bring as a leading woman in tech.